Peterson. I have the great pleasure of serving as the chairman of the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. And in my day job, I actually work for Cook Group, Cook Medical, which is a big, large, privately held medical technology company based out of Bloomington. But we employ about 7,000 people in the state of Indiana, all the way from Bloomington, Indianapolis to West Lafayette. And the reason this is relevant, I think, is that our company employs people from the basic folks, many of which on our operating floor have just a high school diploma, all the way up through engineers and lawyers and doctors and PhDs. So we have a great spectrum of the population that we deal with. And my 28 years at Cook has provided me with a lot of opportunities to deal with the important workforce needs within our company and our industry. And so I try and bring that experience and knowledge to the table, if you will, when I'm involved with the commission. And I really been on the commission now for 4 years and just getting ready, or just starting my second 4-year term, and I have really enjoyed and felt great about the work that I've been doing with the fellow commission members, with Teresa and the wonderful staff at the commission. So it's a great pleasure for me to be here and to welcome you and get your conference started. Once again, we've got 350 people, higher education leaders from across this state of Indiana, and we're so thrilled for you to be here. And really, I just love conferences like this where it's really tangible information that people can wrap their arms around, and not just talking theory and policy, but practical information that all of you can take back, hopefully, learn from each other, share best practices, tell stories, good ones, bad ones, all of the above, but learn from each other, learn from others, and take it back to your organizations to really help students succeed across the state, which is, again, our complete goal in all of this. Before I introduce Teresa Lubbers, I just want to wish you well for a good couple of days, and also want to, for sure, thank our sponsor, USA Funds, for making this happen for the second year in a row. We couldn't do things like this and provide all of this to all of you without their support. So really want to support them and thank them for their sponsoring this event. Without further ado, I want to introduce our keynote first speaker, and that is Commissioner Teresa Lubbers from the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. Teresa was appointed in 2009 to serve as commissioner for the Indiana Commission for Higher Education, which is the coordinating agency charged with ensuring the state's post-secondary education system is aligned to meet the needs of students and the state. Prior to joining the commission, Teresa served in the Indiana Senate for 17 years, leading on issues from education to economic development, and particularly in her role as chair of the Senate Education and Career Development Committee. Teresa is a member of several state and national boards and organizations on education, and is the co-founder of the Lugar Series for Excellence in Public Service for Women. She holds an undergraduate degree from Indiana University and a Master of Public Affairs from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. She's a phenomenal leader and couldn't be a better leader for the Indiana Commission for Higher Education and education in general in the state of Indiana. So please help me welcome my good friend, Teresa Lubbers.
Thank you, Dan. I always wonder if this podium is going to be so tall that no one sees me, but I think actually this one I can rise above, so that's good. I have 3 thank yous I'd like to begin with, and first I'd like to extend my thanks to Dan Peterson for being here with us today. You know, we ask a lot of the members of our commissions who are volunteers, who have busy lives, and they give a lot to the work that we do at the Commission for Higher Education. He's a great leader for us, he's a great chairman, and we look forward to working with him in the next year or so during the time that he is chair, during which time we will be making recommendations for budget and financial aid and lots of important things that we're doing, but none more important than what we're doing today, talking about student success. I know we will have other opportunities to do this, but I have to begin by recognizing Emily Sellers, who's in the back of the room. Emily, I know you're modest, but while Emily had a team of people helping her, it would not be incorrect to say that this conference would not go on without Emily. She is, I kiddingly said to her today, Emily, you're just not conscientious enough, because she cares so much about the work that she does, and I think it will be reflected in the detail that you see at today's conference. And then finally, I'd just like to thank each of you because I know you're busy people. I know you came here and can't do something else, but I hope that you will believe at the end of the day tomorrow that it was well worth your time. As you look at the agenda and the issues that we're going to be addressing, I think it will be. And clearly, we have the right people in the room today to do that. So thank you for being with us. We think it will be well worth your time. As we mentioned, this is the second Student Advocates Conference, and last year's conference was a huge success. We believe this year will build on that success in bringing the right people together. We really try to align the work of policy and programs with the work that we do to actually make sure that our policies are designed to really improve student success. You know, we have a strategic plan at the Commission called Reaching Higher, Delivering Value. And I often say about strategic planning, it is a great plan, but it is a plan, it is an agenda. What really happens is when it's implemented at the colleges and universities and our relationship with our K-12 partners as well. So we think this conference gives us a chance to actually talk to each other about how we really put into practice those policies that we endorse. And we find that the best way to do that is to really bring a group of people like this together. We found last year that I don't think this kind of a group had ever really come together before. And so the cross-pollination between the roles that you play in your daily lives and then having the chance to talk about it, I think will make a big difference. To that extent, we've really tried to bring in a diverse group of topics and panelists to talk to you as well. Let me make just a couple comments about the work that we're doing at the Commission to provide context for today's discussion. Because I'm talking to a group of pros, I know you'll know most of this, but let me just reiterate it for those who already know it, and some of you may be fairly new to this world, and so it may be new information for you. At the Commission, we are intently focused on the big goal of making sure that 60% of Hoosiers have some sort of a quality degree or credential beyond high school. Let me say, as I always say, that the Commission understands this looks very differently for different students. We're not talking four-year degrees for everybody, though we do rank 40th in the nation in bachelor's degrees, so we can't take our eye off of that ball. We're talking about quality degrees and credentials that allow a person to have a meaningful career. And that may be certificates, credentials, associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, or graduate degrees as well. We need all of those to really do what I usually talk about in three ways, which is really improve personal prosperity. If you look at the jobs that are coming back, we need to make sure that the jobs that come back actually are increasing the per capita income of Hoosiers at the same time. So what we do is really, at its very core, student-centered to actually make sure that people have the opportunity to have a meaningful career in life. If you look at our strategic plan, it starts with the guiding principle of building a student-centered system of higher education. But the other thing that we talk about a lot, more now than ever, and I think Dan reflected on this a little bit, which is really aligning the work that we do with meeting the needs of employers. We think that's appropriate to talk about the alignment between a quality education and a meaningful career and meeting the needs of employers. So more than ever, we talk about that alignment as well. And then if we do both of those things, what we really are succeeding in doing is actually changing and growing and improving a state economy. And that's what we're really engaged in doing in Indiana. Changing a culture of a state that for rational reasons, people did not always choose to continue their education because the jobs didn't require it, to an understanding that 21st century jobs do. Even for students who go straight from high school into the world of work, and many will, we need to make sure that they graduate high school with some sort of a credential that gives them the opportunity to have that kind of career that they need. To give you some context for that 60% goal, we're at about 41% right now. That's below the national average, but we are trending at a rate that's faster than the national average. And if you look at our younger population, again, not surprising because the older population, people my age or older, didn't necessarily have that an attainment level that included something beyond high school. But the younger population is improving at a faster level. So that message that we're sending is starting to get out there. But if we're going to, that 60% goal is a goal that's established for 2025. It is a heavy lift, and it is why student success in all the ways that you're going to talk about today are so important. It's also, I think, worth noting that the 60% goal is clearly aligned to the workforce needs. So it's not as if some thinker sat around in a room and said, wouldn't it be nice if we could increase our attainment by 20%? What they said is, what are the jobs going to need? And we need to set a goal to make sure that we're able to hit that goal so that we can meet the workforce needs. Let me mention one population in this regard that I hope you know about and you'll be able to hear about a little bit over the next couple days, and that is our campaign to reach students who have some college, adults who have some college but no degree. Actually, 750,000 Hoosiers have some college but no degree. That's about 21% of the working age population. That is a huge population that for some reason, life got in the way and they didn't finish. And we want to give them every reason to say, now is the time to come back. We have about 30 colleges and universities around the state who are partnering with us in this effort, many of them providing incentives, financial incentives, as well as the state financial incentive that we're providing. Now, the likelihood, we may catch a few people who are over the age of 50 or 55 who come back, but that's probably not the target market. We're really beginning to look at those people who have been out 10 years or less. Now, the campaign is reaching out to more than that, and we're delighted when others come back as well, but we're focusing our efforts there. And we really are quite pleased with the initial response to this. Those of you who have worked in this area know how difficult it is. People don't just wake up one morning and say, I have kids and a job, but I'm going to go back to school and finish. You have to give them the right kinds of incentives for them to do that. A huge change for Indiana, since many times that we've done this in the past, is the creation of a true community college system, providing options to people that we didn't really have in the past at the same way that we do now. We've contacted about 4,700 students have actually responded to our campaign and contacted a college and done the college match. And we now, another way to indicate the early success, this time last year we had a little over 2,000 people who had applied for the adult student grant. We are at about 22,000 right now. Now that doesn't mean, that's not the end, that's not the outcome, that's the interest that's being expressed. But we're convinced that this campaign that we would like to run between now and 2020, just to keep our foot on the pedal, just keep going as hard as we can, keep contacting people, will in fact reap benefits for that population. And at the same time, we certainly can't keep our eyes off of the ball from the people who are going straight from high school into college or those who are in college right now. And the goal there has always been to make sure that students understand, as important as access is, that's not the prize. Completion is the prize, and whenever possible, on time, or at least less time to graduation than it has been in the past. Some people get a little tired of hearing us talk about on time or more timely completion, but the cost associated with taking too long to stay in college can be devastating to students and individuals, and the likelihood that they will complete if it takes too long goes down as well. One of the things that we've tried to do to address this, as well as looking at how we fund colleges and universities and providing additional funding for no matter how long it takes someone to graduate. So if it takes 10 or 15 years, the college or university benefits from that, but there's a premium placed on more timely completion as well. So that's done at the college and university level. At the student level, especially for those students who receive financial aid, we've tried to make sure that they understand that they're going to run out of financial aid in Indiana in 4 years. So as I always say, it may be a little bit of tough love to say you need to stay on target to graduate on time, but at the end of the day, it's still love because they're not going to run out of financial aid before they complete. We've worked with the legislature and we've worked with our colleges and universities to send a very clear message that in order to receive the maximum amount of money from the state, you need to be taking 30 credit hours in a calendar year. We expanded it so that it's not just 2 academic semesters, but if you, in fact, start with 15 credits and you drop a course, you can make it up in the summer. And so we're trying to make sure that we send that message, and the early results, I think, have been quite dramatic. I think there's something in your folders today that will actually provide some more background information about what's happened to students who are actually taking more credits and actually more likely to graduate on time. One of the statistics that we use is that in the last 5 years, we've seen over an 8%, nearly a 9% increase in on-time bachelor degree completion and a 3.2 percentage increase for those who are taking two-year degrees. Those of you who look at these numbers know how hard those numbers are to move. So thank you for the work that you're doing to help us get that message. We found that students who are taking, who are full-time students, so we're not talking about part-time students now, but students who are taking those 30 credit hours and are receiving the financial aid, they're more likely to have higher GPAs, they're more likely to complete all the credits that they attempt, and they're more likely to persist to their sophomore year. So I think it's not counterintuitive, as some might say, to send a message that on-time completion matters. We also think that another way that we can help you in your work, and it's something that the Commission has been committed to, is the providing of as much good information and data as we can. And so if you will take advantage of our website to look at the reports there, we have 4 in particular that I would cite to you, although we have others as well. And they are the College Readiness Report. We find that our high school partners are asking for these reports. It follows their students from high school to college. How are they doing? What are they majoring in? What do they need remediation in? Are they persisting? How much dual credit did they get? Lots of information, and it really sort of is the look back and the look forward that I think is really important. So that's a really good report, and we've done that for several years. The companion piece to that is the College Completion Report, where we try to look at college in a much more comprehensive way than just, as you would know, the iPad's way of looking at graduation. So we look at on-time, extended time, those who start with trying to get one degree and get a different degree. So we look at a much more comprehensive look on college completion. And then in keeping with our strategic plan, which is called Reaching Higher, Delivering Value, what became apparent to us when we were putting together the new strategic plan is the thing that kind of holds all these conversations together is value. Value to the student, value to the state, value to the employer, and not value in a limited way of how much does it cost, although that is important, but value in a broad way of what does higher education really mean. And I think we know that higher education has come under some degree of scrutiny and some criticism, and the idea that we are showing our value in a very aggressive way, I think, is important. So we put out a return on investment report, which actually shows campus by campus, how much does it cost, how much does it cost after financial aid, what's the debt, what are you likely to make in their major areas of study 1, 5, and 10 years out. We put that report out. We were very intentional about saying this is a fairly blunt instrument, and we know this isn't the only way that you measure the value of higher education. People who have some education beyond high school are likely to have healthier lives. They're more likely to be involved in their engagement in their work, civic participation, lots of other ways to measure the value of higher education as well. And so, for the first time this year, just a few months ago, we partnered with Gallup and colleges and universities to put out what we believe is the first in the nation report called an Indiana College Value Index, which attempts to marry the quantitative metrics that were in the ROI report with the qualitative metrics of other ways to measure the value of higher education. It is imperfect, as is every report when you start, but it is a step in the right direction, and we're committed to continuing because we think it's another way to show the value of higher education to the people who are the consumers, to the policymakers, and to anyone else who sort of has some reason to be involved with the world of higher education. So I commend those reports to you as well. So I've probably propagandized to you enough, but you're there listening, so I got a chance to sort of promote all of those things. I hope that you believe, as we do, that we are partners in this work together, that everything that we do is really focused on trying to do what we can to help you be more successful. And so today is a great day for us to come together and have those discussions. Again, we have the right people in the room. I think we have the right topics for you to discuss. And I'm just delighted to welcome you here and to say, have a great 2 days. We think it'll be worth your time. And with that, I'm going to welcome our first panel to the stage. If you'd like to come on up. In particular, I will introduce To you, Craig Anderson, who's the president of Student Connections, which is a division of USA Funds, which we know sponsors for us today. They're going to lead with our morning panel, and I believe Craig's going to make the other introductions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Levers, and good morning, everyone. I'm pleased today to be joined on my panel today, starting from my right. Jeffrey Fanter, the Senior Vice President of Student Experience, Communications, and Marketing at Ivy Tech Community College. Tammy Lakes, the Vice President for Product Innovation and Management at Student Connections. And Taylor Rademacher, the incoming President of the Pi Sigma Epsilon Business Fraternity and a senior at Ball State, majoring in professional selling. So please join me in welcoming the panel today. We'll turn to the panel in just a few minutes. I just wanted to have a few introductory comments. So first, on behalf of USA Funds and Student Connections, welcome to the conference. We're very pleased to be with you here today. Student Connections is a relatively new piece of the USA Funds family of companies. And our company at Student Connections is a not-for-profit, again, within USA Funds, which helps support our larger corporate mission at USA Funds of completion with a purpose, helping students not only to get into college, but also to successfully complete and then transition into the workforce, which I think is the goal of all of us here in the room. So our particular specialty at USA Funds within Student Connections is enhancing student success through the classroom to career journey and connecting students with the opportunity that they have in their higher education. Through our company, we have about 5 decades of experience working with schools and students, and we've developed quite a unique perspective, especially through our origins as a student loan company, especially working with students as we do at Student Connections, who are delinquent on their student loans. We work with schools to reach out to those students and help them get their loans back into good standing, because as we talk about trying to get students back into school, if they've defaulted on their student loans, it is very difficult for them to re-enter the school and complete the degree they set out to do. And over the last 5 years, we've had a lot of success doing that. We've worked with over 2.7 million student loan borrowers over the last since 2011. And just this last year, we cured 170,000 students by moving them from a delinquent status into a current status, which represents about $1.8 billion worth of student loans. So we're very excited about the work they do there. But what we've come to realize is we're really fixing kind of the downside of it, and we're really focused on what can we do to help fix students and make them successful so we don't have to get into those discussions about the delinquency. And we realize that that's needed a really holistic approach that helps students make better decisions throughout the spectrum of their educational timeline. So we've been partnering with schools, we've been partnering with students, and that's why we put this panel together today. Because as we've been working to put these solutions together, what was very important to us is not just for us to sit down and say, we think this is what the issues are. We've worked with a panel of expert advisory members made up of people from the higher education community, but also importantly, we've brought a lot of students to the fold, because we can create a whole lot of solutions, but if students don't want to use those solutions, we may as well not have created it at all. So we want to make sure we have an experience that is something that students will engage with, or we've all done a lot of work for nothing. So we think there's a lot of issues out there. As we look, 70% of students have not attended a personal finance class or workshop. In high school, 77% haven't done so in college. And more than 55% of students said they don't really have a good idea of how much money they're going to need to borrow to pay for school. Even more concerning, according to a study from 2 years ago, half of first-year students with loans have more debt already than they realize, but 30% didn't think they even had student loans when they did in fact have student loans. So we have a lot of issues around here about helping students become better users and users of money and to really understand those money management skills, as well as the skills they need around time management, study skills, and the other things as they move into further down transitioning into the workforce. So that is why we've been working to put our new product together, which is called Student Success Center. But what we want to do today is spend time digging into some of these issues around student success through our panelists. So I'll start with kind of our first question, and then as we get through this, we'll also open this up to questions from the audience. So the first question I'll put out to Jeff from Ivy Tech is, as you look at students today, the post-secondary student, how equipped are they to manage their non-school related life issues around finances and other things that might impact their continuing school?
Well, Craig, obviously when you look at our situation at Ivy Tech Community College, and certainly many of my colleagues in the room can relate to this, how diverse our student body is. I think one of the key things is can they do it independently? And I think for some the answer is yes, but for many, the answer is no. I know myself, I had a support system at home with my parents who helped me navigate through college to make sure really things that could become issues never were. I hope I'll do the same for my daughter, who's a freshman in high school now. But for some of our students, the things that are life, and Commissioner Levers talked about life being in the way, they don't really realize they're issues until they become issues while they're at school. They don't realize the time commitment it takes to study and be successful in school, and suddenly it's, well, when do I find time for my kids? Where do I find daycare for my kids? My job schedule, how do I manage my job schedule and know how much time I have to commit to school? They don't become issues until they're here, when they're enrolled in school. So they're not issues for them. They don't realize until they get enrolled in school, and they don't have resources to go look at. And independently, I don't know, some find them, some don't. I think some of the skill sets that you guys do there at USA Funds for us are a good example of where it's a resource where they can go learn more about personal financing. The other thing I'll touch on is career exploration. And interesting enough, our president, Dr. Sue Elsperman, she's teaching a college success course at Ivy Tech, and she gives the students an assignment, which is, think about the job that you want, go look at the demand-driven data, find out how many job openings there are, what the potential earnings are for that job, and are you going to be successful in that job knowing what your life is and the responsibilities that you have. She actually has them do an assignment or write a paper that she sends to them, or sends to her. She grades all those papers. I don't think the grade goes into their grades, but she actually gives them all a response back, every single one of them. And what you find in there is that they really haven't done too much of the career exploration. They think they know what they want to do, but don't realize what the demand is, don't realize what the pay is, and they may not be able to live on that when they look at it. I don't think enough of that happens independently, and enough of that happens before they get to college today with a lot of students in higher education, that I think independently some of those resources aren't as effective or aren't easily found for students out there today.
Great, very good. Tammy, I don't know in some of the, oh, excuse me, Taylor, yeah. So Taylor, actually, we talked a little bit before, and I think Taylor has some interesting perspective as a student right now actively engaged in the educational process. Taylor?
Yeah, so I'd like to start with giving you guys some background on where I've come from. I'm from a really small town in western Indiana called Williamsport, and the norm for me coming out of high school was not to go to college. Our school, since we are so small, kids usually go work on a farm, go to the factory, something like that. So I can speak from experience saying that I didn't have the resources available to me that prepared me for what I was getting into. So for me, managing time was one of the biggest things that I had to, learn to do, and learning to study effectively. And the reason I think that ties into time is because that's one thing I had to do outside of class. And living in the dorms was a big adjustment too. You've got kids coming into your dorm, hey, let's go to the rec. A group of girls comes in for 10 minutes. Just all these little distractions that I think add a lot of stress to your beginning years in college. Also, I think student involvement is a big thing that can get in the way. Because I was in club baseball, and we had practice at midnight, 1 in the morning. So I think that managing your time around stuff like that is, it plays a big part in where you're going in school. Another thing I can attest to is money management. Most kids, you guys probably remember this, make about $3,000 over the summer, try and save it all, think you're gonna have enough money for school for the year. By about October, what you got left? Nothing. So I think that having a budget in place, to get you through the year is a really important step that a lot of students aren't taking right now. And then probably the biggest thing for me is students that know where they're going after school, they seem to have a higher success rate. Like me, I've changed my major 4 times and I'm behind because of it. So I think that knowing where you're going, that's probably the biggest thing for, creating a culture of success. So.
Great, thank you, Taylor, appreciate it. Tammy, maybe through some of our research, you have some comments as well.
Yes, definitely. I was hoping we could just take a quick moment just for my own entertainment. I'm curious about what folks we have in the room. So would you mind raising your hand if you work for an institution? Look at that. That's beautiful. Okay, keep your hand up if it is a 2-year institution, please. Good. And then 4-year?
Wow.
Thank you. And then one last time, please raise your hand if you help students or institutions, but you're not directly affiliated with an institution? Okay. These are my people. I mean, come on, this is such a happy day. I really appreciate you having us here today. So what we do at Student Connections is help develop tools for students during the times that they're struggling, from the time that they start thinking about potentially going to college all the way through college until they're successfully employed doing something that they wanted to do. So when you think about what that whole continuum entails, there are some real challenges, and we've worked with our expert advisory board to identify what are those drop points that students experience along the way. And what we found over the last year, and I mean, truthfully, I've spent my career in education, so I've been collecting data points on this for almost 2 decades now. And what we find is that when students are dropping out or these challenges that they're encountering, it's entirely predictable. Many of you probably in this room could almost say, yes, I know of a student that ended up dropping out, and I saw the first signs of it, or we knew that this was coming, and it just took that one last straw, and there was nothing that we could do at that point. But it's all about small micro decisions that students make along the way that start to add up, and it leads to a difficult situation for them by the time they realize what has actually happened. So I think that we've touched on a couple pretty important points here, and I'd like to go back to one because there is one area where it's a trip up for students, and we don't have a solid system in place as our education system stands today. I think many times students show up on your doorstep and they don't really know what they want to do, right? So we're asking them to declare a major, and the major is going to lead to their career. And many times students haven't actually spent a day or even a half a day shadowing somebody who works in that career. They have no idea what they're really getting into. So a prime example is an organization that I worked with. They had a girl who went through her entire nursing curricula. She gets graduated, she's out in the workforce, and her first day on the job, when she's just doing it on her own, she realizes every time she sees blood, it makes her vomit. So then she has the student loans, and they've kicked in full force, and she can't actually do the job that she was prepared to do, so she has to she ended up working as a barista, and thank goodness for baristas, but you actually don't need a college degree for that. So we have to somehow reconcile what's happening there. We were talking with Taylor before this started, and it was interesting what he mentioned. Would you mind sharing the story?
Yeah, so one of the points that I brought up was, since I was from such a small school, in 2008 we lost a lot of teachers that taught upper level stuff like computer-aided design, industrial technology, finance, stuff like that. So basically we went through math, science, English, the core curriculum, and then once we went on to college, we didn't really know what we wanted to do. I came to school with 9 of my friends from high school, and 2 of them are currently not enrolled. 2 of them graduated on time, and the rest of us are still in school. So I think that knowing where you want to go is probably the most important thing. So I think that universities that could implement or just endorse, like, try this, try that, instead of getting like all of your electives out of the way first, like classical culture and communication, stuff like that that isn't what you want your career path to be. I think that if you could get an idea of where you're going first would really help people out in the long run.
And one last thing on this thing, Taylor. So the way that the system is set up currently, that might require that students spend a class an entire semester just trying to figure out, through paying and running up their college loans and also burning through the time that they're expected to actually be able to graduate, they're trying to do career exploration. So my job is to find innovative ways to create tools or connect students into different resources that can help them find some of these solutions ahead of time, so we don't have students showing up on your doorstep not having any idea what they actually want to do. So we're working on that, but we'll get into more of that later.
Sure. Thank you, Tammy. So we talked a lot of these challenges, and the big question is, how are students managing these challenges, and what resources are available to them? Taylor, maybe you could talk right from the source on how students are managing these challenges today in your experience.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that it's a lot of trial and error right now. I don't think that students are coming to school with a plan in place, like how they're going to deal with, money and time and studying and social lives. I think that if, there's a program in place to avoid the trial and error, the success rates of students would be a lot higher. Personally, for me, getting a job was a huge help. It provided structure, like, I've got class this time, this time, this time. I've got work at this time, so this is when I have to get my stuff done. If I don't, I'm screwed. So I think that having that structure academically and also financially, because like I said, once you run out of money, things aren't good. And so if you can have some income coming in plus structure and, avoid all the stresses that come along with that, I think that's a huge advantage for students. As far as resources go on our campus, we have what's called our Learning Center, and students can go to that anytime. They have tutors for each course. They'll help you with your course materials. They'll teach you great study habits. They're honestly just great mentors in there. And then also, you mentioned 70% of students don't go through personal finance.
Right.
Ball State does require a personal finance course, and I think that is huge because you learn about credit cards and mortgages and just basic loans and all that kind of stuff that provides a basis for what is coming after college. So I think that's a huge resource that students are forced to take advantage of, which is awesome.
Great. Thanks, Taylor. Tammy, I don't know if you have some thoughts on those areas as well.
I think you know me well enough to know I have thoughts on
She
just
thoughts
about
on
everything.
yeah.
Thank you. So in working with students, what we've done is put together a student advisory board. We're creating technologies for students, but I really believe that if you're creating technology, then the end user should be helping to design what it looks like. So as we're working with students, we're asking some pretty basic questions, but trying to find out how are they accessing resources, how are they finding out information. If they run into a struggle throughout their college career, who do they go to? And we've been quizzing thousands of students certainly over the last year, but even the last couple. And the one thing that I heard out of students that was interesting is that they actually rely on their peers to answer questions for them, which, for emotional support, that's probably appropriate. But when you're looking at serious financial questions, for students to be relying on their peers, and the other main source of information is their social media networks. So let's just think about that for a second. If anybody's gone online and done some serious stalking in the way that I do, because I think it's important to be able to hear and feel the pulse of students that are going through this today, you realize that if they're actually taking advice that they're reading online or taking advice from, if it's a traditional student, from a 19-year-old peer about serious money decisions, it explains a lot about what the condition of the state is today. So we can do better for our students, and a lot of that is in just designing resources for them that they actually want to use. So this will be the last point on this, but throughout my career I've worked at Pearson and ACT, and I know that billions of dollars, literally billions of dollars, are flowing into the system to create products and supports for students. And it's very rare that students actually see it or comment on it, give input, or talk about what they need prior to it landing on their doorstep. So if a student is fed a product, let's just take an old school traditional textbook, for instance, it's not actually the way that students are consuming information at this point. So what we're doing with the Student Advisory Board is learning from students, and thousands of them over time, how they want to consume the information, how they cognitively can consume the information. They're taking in bite-sized chunks at this point digitally, and they're doing it walking through the hall, or, sorry to say, sitting on the toilet, or they're doing it at very strange times, but this is how they're actually taking in the world and how they're learning. So when you start to think about what that actually means, it's going to be hard to get a young person or a student who's already overtaxed on their time to sit down and read a textbook or read a traditional resource about what it is that we need for them to learn. We actually have to feed it to them in the way that they're willing to consume it. So that's the work that we have going right now.
Great. And Jeff, obviously with Ivy Tech and kind of the breadth across the state and the diversity of the students, how are you guys addressing the resource issues and some of these other challenges?
Well, we have some folks in the room. Our advising teams across the state do a tremendous job with our students, and I mentioned the complexity of our student body. But obviously, there's only so many advisors compared to how many students that we have. So sometimes it's difficult for a student to be able to get in to see an advisor when they need to and when really they're ready to or on their time. But they do a tremendous job, and we certainly connect the students with them. But if you talk to our students, they talk about the resource for them, too, is the faculty in the classroom and the personal attention they get with the small class sizes that we have. There's a bond that they make with the faculty. But faculty only know so much. And when it comes to some of the life things that get in the way, they may not be able to help them with the resources on whether it be finance, childcare, how they're going to manage the work schedule, whatever it might be that comes up. I think one of the biggest things that I found, and my background's a little unique coming to higher education. I worked in college athletics my whole time before this, and I'll say that about the student athlete, especially I worked at Indiana University as assistant athletic director. When they had a need, they got it, and they got it in about 5 minutes. It didn't take long for them to get what they needed, whether it was a meal because of training table, or whether it was a tutor, whether it was help. They didn't have to go seek it out and find it.
Sure.
We need to ask our students more about how they want information, where they want information, and what information they want, and just in what chunkable, digestible size they need it. And I don't know, we're not alone, but higher education doesn't do that enough to ask the student how they want it and what they want. We make a lot of assumptions ourselves, what we think they want, based on our observations of their experience. And I think we have an opportunity to get better at understanding and talking to folks like Taylor and fellow students. What do you want, when do you want it, and how do you want it? I think sometimes we do a lot to feed our students through a fire hose. And it's just, they pick up bits and pieces, and it might not be the right bit and piece for that moment for them.
Sure, sure. Thank you. And Tammy, we've talked a lot about this, as she noted. We talk a lot about a lot of things, but what happens to students when they don't have the skills, right? We talk about our business kind of starting from the downside of this, where they end up in a delinquent or default situation. But what happens to these students if they can't meet the challenges, and what are the implications for students who don't have the non-academic skills to successfully complete?
Thank you. I have a feeling that most of us in this room have actually had an experience with a student that indicates what happens to those students. So one more time, raise your hand if you've ever had a conversation with a student where they were coming to you almost in a state of despair or complete desperation because they already got past the point where it was where you could provide an intervention. That's most of the room. So again, thank you for your work with our students. The people in this room, we are critical to the success of this state and of the future of this country. So I've already stated that I am a student stalker online. I think that that's when you actually hear their real thoughts. I mean, truthfully, our student advisory board is more than willing to be heard at any time. They have no qualms about putting their real feelings out there, and we're grateful for that. We try to set up that environment. But I do think it's also important to see people where they're living. So those posts that pop up online are, they're interesting. So I go on before school starts. So at the time that a student gets accepted in the spring, all the way through the summer, to when they start school, you start to see an uptick in some anxiety posts, I call them, all the way through that first semester. So I took one down just so I could share with you this young lady's Twitter bio. She's an excited student, right? Her biography says, "Experience does for the soul what education does for the mind." So you know that you're dealing with somebody who's excited to go to school. This isn't a resistant student. So her post in August said, Day 6 of school, feeling lost, confused, scared, and unprepared. I'm ready to drop out. Unfortunately, a post in October was mentioning suicide, and it seems like things have picked up since then, but this is not an original case, right? This is happening all over the United States. This is not something specific to the state of Indiana, where students come in and they're feeling overwhelmed by all of the layers of responsibilities that they have. So whether it is a traditional student, which is now the smallest percentage of the population of students, so we probably should stop calling them traditional at some point. So whether it's a traditional student learning how to live on their own and how to just make sure that they have money to pay for the soap that doesn't magically show up in their shower and the food that they need to get 3 times a day, or if you're talking about an untraditional student, non-traditional, who is trying to balance life, kids, and possibly, sick parents, 1 or 2 jobs, what you find is that these people are impacted by trying to layer on school on top of everything else. So it goes back again to some of those basic schools that we need to equip these students with so they can better manage the day-to-day responsibilities that they're trying to measure.
Great, thanks. Jeff, from your perspective at Ivy Tech and in your background, what has been the impact for students, even if they're successful, maybe, to students who have these challenges?
Well, I think for all of those that raised their hand, thank you, obviously, for you probably saved tens of thousands of students, but there was probably 5 others that didn't come see you, and they just left. We certainly see that where the semester starts, and just as the post that Tammy referenced, the students excited, but then some of those issues that they didn't realize that were issues, life kind of gets in the way, and maybe school's not the priority over some of the other things, and they disappear. They're not on our campus anymore. They're not showing up in class. They're not returning phone calls. You're trying to reach out to them to get them back, and by the time the term ends, they've made a decision that maybe it's I'm going to put off school and I'll start again. But sometimes they don't realize how that decision impacts them and their financial aid when you do reach out to them to come back, and they come back and there's a level of excitement, but they're in a situation where they may not be able to receive federal aid because of decisions they made years ago, not knowing, thinking for them it was the right decision, and frankly, maybe it was because they had a sick parent at home, or they were going through a divorce at home, or they had situations with their children, and school just, couldn't figure out how to make it work. And it wasn't a priority for them amongst all these other things, but those decisions impacted them 5, 7, 10 years down the road, and they didn't realize when they made those decisions, and it's because they just didn't have that conversation with somebody to be educated on how that impact of the decision would be, and then it catches up with them later in the day. We have some that quite very successful students that fought through that, and maybe they didn't go all the way to the point of termination, but they're in warning, and they know it, they're in warning status, and they recover themselves and they get themselves in a good shape that they're going to continue to get their aid. Because for many of our students, at Ivy Tech, the finance and the money is key, and if that's lost in some fashion, school's not an option for them, or they can't make that choice to continue. But I think that you just have to, as best we can, we're a big institution with many students, to monitor students as best you can to try to see when those indications are coming. Tammy mentioned, we do a lot via some of our social media stuff, and to see some of the posts, and people ask, we have over 100,000 likes, what friends, whatever terminology you want to use on Facebook, and Facebook is the predominant source for many of our students. And we don't actually use it as a marketing tool, we use it as a customer service tool. And basically it's just we use it for a way for students who post different questions or comments that we respond to. And what's neat about it is sometimes our students beat us to the response. I'd say 85% of the time the response is right. Sometimes we need to go in and clean up the response a little bit. But you see that, and to take advantage of that environment where they're in and they're asking each other questions, you have to embrace those things, because it's not always going to happen face-to-face, behind a desk, in an office, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, where they're going to come over and have a conversation with you. How you use some of these other resources do that, I think is critical.
Great, thanks. It's interesting you talk about just how they get lost in some of this. The students we talk to on our default prevention side it's amazing the stories we hear on how they drop out like that, and they don't really realize what their options are to fix their problem, so they don't get into that point, so they can't go back to school and life settles down. So it's a great point. Taylor, you obviously are right in the thick of it. You talked about kind of the attrition rate of your 9 fellow students that headed off to Ball State. You know, what happens to them and some of your other students as they kind of lack these skills and can't hit the challenges?
I remember freshman orientation, and I can't remember who was speaking, but they said, everybody take a moment and look to your left, and then look to your right. Chances are one of you guys won't be here by the end of the year. And I mean, obviously that's true for my 9 friends. I've lost 2 of them to school. So I think that it's never because they're not smart enough. It's usually they just can't get these, life skills developed soon enough. I think that's one of the biggest issues that people are running into. My 2 friends that had to drop out, they're both in maintenance jobs. They still haven't figured out, so they're still struggling. It's just been a snowball for them. So it's critical to get these, management skills developed. The big thing that I've been seeing with students that, stay in school even after struggling like this is a lot of times their grades aren't good enough to get into the stuff they want to get into, whether it's a fraternity or a student, student council type organization or whatever. If they don't have the GPA, then they're not getting into this, and it's discouraging them a lot. And then students that do make it into the real world, I just want to address this. They're struggling. I mean, if they're applying for a job and they have a 2.5 GPA, even for companies that say GPA isn't everything, they're probably still going to hire the person that has a 3.5 instead.
Right.
So getting a handle on these skills early is critical for success after college.
Great. Thanks, Taylor. We're going to open it up to questions here in just a second. I have one quick speed round question for our panel, but if there are microphones, at least I can see 2 in the room if anybody has some questions for our panelists. But final question, and we'll just go across the panel starting with Jeff. In 1 minute or less, complete this sentence. Students who can manage their life more effectively will.
Life. And I think I'll build on that and just say students that can prioritize things in their life most effectively are going to be more successful in life, however you want to define life. And one of the examples I'd give is just sometimes it's a hard decision to decide to go to school because you have other priorities in life. But if you can make that maybe a higher priority than some of the others and give some of those other areas and really put in the time, the effort, go as full-time as you can to finish that sooner, it's going to pay off in the end. So that prioritization, I think, is critical for people to be successful in life.
Great, thanks. Tammy?
So I believe students who can manage their time more effectively will think clearly, allowing themselves to make better micro decisions along the way. So I just have to touch on this because when you're looking at some of these Twitter statements, I found one last night that said, I'm kind of sort of scared that having this 4th job now will force me to basically fail all of my classes, which will then lead me to drop out. So if we think that there's not a level of anxiety and depression that goes along with this, we're fooling ourselves, right? So the National Alliance on Mental Health says 80% of students report feeling overwhelmed by their responsibilities. 50% of students have been so anxious that they struggle in school. And back to Jeff's point, 40% of students do not seek help. So we have to actually put the tools in front of them in the way that they're ready to consume them and that the information is actually relevant. So we're working on this, but these are critical points that we have to hit on for the health of our society and for our kids.
Great. Taylor?
I think that when students get this figured out, they'll have less stress, they'll be more successful in life and in school, and they'll just overall be happier. When you're succeeding, it's pretty easy to be happy.
Yep, very good. Thank you. All right, I think we have some mics. A question back here. Oh, I thought I saw someone stand there with a mic. Okay, no one has a mic. Questions in the back? Yes.
First, Taylor, I want to thank you for being here for a college senior. I just want to commend you on your poise and maturity. You really have it together, and I think you're awesome because when I was a college senior, I was not as awesome as you. So thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Tammy, I really like your idea of reaching students where they are, no matter where it is, with the content that they need to succeed in non-academic. I wonder if you feel like we also need to apply this principle to academic content, or if, just kind of your thoughts on that.
Thank you for the question. And I agree with your point about Taylor. How great is he?
He's awesome.
Especially on last minute notice. So that is a great question about whether these same principles need to be applied towards academic materials. When you're looking at human-centered design, which is basically unpacking a problem and watching a person where they live and in this situation that they're experiencing, whatever difficulty it is, what you start to see is that if you design for that challenge that they're having, then normally the solution looks a lot different than whatever the solutions currently in place are. So in short, I think that the answer is yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure that we could see higher levels of persistence on the academic side if we did allow students to consume information in the way that they're consuming all of the other information in their lives. It would make sense. And as a side note, with our student advisory board, when they see the apps that we're building for the non-academic skills like goal setting and basic money management, a student said, can we get this app for our regular subjects, and can't we just get everything through this app? Which is a testament to building it to account for the student desires and the student needs. Of course, my response was no. Yes, eventually maybe, but let's just get this thing kicked out the door and let's get you guys using this and skill up in those areas that actually are normally the reasons that students are having to drop out of school. It's the non-academic side as opposed to the academic. So in short, yes, absolutely. And I believe that we can get there. It is a heavy lift because when you have companies producing materials that are, they're steeped in the industry and the way that they've always done things, that's a big challenge. But everything is primed for disruption, and I would say that our education system and the publishing industry is top of the list. Thank you for the question.
Other questions? There's one up here, two up here, and one over here. Oh, right here. Sorry.
I'm can't see everybody, but I'm Kimberly Ewing, and I'm with Starfish Initiative. Hello. First of all, thank you so much, panel, for sharing what you've shared this morning. It's really great information to hear. I even told my colleague next to me, I said, oh yeah, we need to do that too. So it kind of jogged some information in my head. The question I have for the panel, Starfish Initiative is a mentoring program for our 21st Century Scholar students. So we pair our students with college-educated mentors, and of course is to get them through high school successfully and off to college. My question to you is, where is that piece as far as students and higher ed? How important is that during that college year, those informative years? Where is that on the table of discussion for those college students?
Extremely important, and some of you may have taken part in the pre-conference with Inside Track. We partner with Inside Track thanks to support and leadership that kicked it off from the CHE at Ivy Tech Community College. And the retention rates that we see with those students certainly have increased because of this coaching and mentoring. We've looked at other partners that we can do this with in a variety of different ways. We're actually partnering with Harvard University in that they have a program where they have a different model, but program where students sign up and indicate who their kind of mentor study buddy might be that would encourage them throughout the course of the term, and they're doing research to look to see how, if they receive texts or emails from that individual, does that help encourage them to be more successful. So we're constantly looking that way. I'm a firm believer that I believe that coaching, that touch point, even if it's just to check in to see how they're doing, especially for many of our students who don't have that support system, there's that support system, and they can just have that conversation with those individuals to encourage them to keep going, to most importantly probably send them to resources they don't know today exist on their campuses when they need that help. And it's obviously it's a heavy lift, it's labor intense to make those calls, to make that outreach, to keep track of those things. So every time you talk to that student, it's not a new conversation, but you reflect on all the prior conversations that you've had. In some cases, it's not scalable for an institution our size, but where we've found it, where we've done it, it's been successful. And personally, and many of my colleagues are strong advocates, we have to continue to find ways to do this outreach on their terms, in their way, which may not always be a phone call at noon, and maybe a phone call at 8 o'clock at night, and maybe just a text wishing them good luck on their midterms the next day. All those touch points, you just never know how an individual is going to respond to those, and you have to get a feel for the student to find out the best way to do it. So, huge advocate. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I think it's critical that we find ways to do that more and more in higher education, and it doesn't stop just at high school.
Other thoughts? Okay.
So has anybody heard the quote, "One person can make the difference in the life of a student"? Does everybody believe that? I mean, it really can just be a single person that reaches out and says, "How you doing today? Thanks for coming in," that can keep a student in school, both at high school and at the college level. I've worked with National University based out in San Diego. They're almost entirely online. They have a challenging student population to keep them enrolled. And one thing that they do is line up mentors for their students, and they've seen a drastic increase as a result of this in retention. Another thing they do is reach out to the families of the students. So if you think of somebody floating out there on their own and struggling with the daily challenges of life, it can be tough. And if nobody's checking in and asking, hey, how's your school going? They can fall off pretty easily, right? Everything can get in the way of the schoolwork that they need to do. By the way, this same model applies in other industries. So weight loss has an entire category stationed around supports for people as they're trying to undergo a diet or a new exercise program where somebody's expecting them to show up at the gym, and so that person shows up at the gym. It just takes one caring individual to make the difference. So I completely agree with everything that Jeff stated, and Starfish, thank you for your work.
I just have one comment on it. Having a mentor has completely changed my path through college, and it's happened within the last year. In my internship with Dish One, I did door-to-door sales. And my manager for that has completely changed my life. Just being a role model, checking in with me, as Jeff mentioned, helping me set goals. I just wrote a paper on goal setting, and if you guys are mentoring somebody, set goals with them. Because somebody who sets a goal each day and achieves that goal, to achieve a bigger goal for the month, to achieve a bigger goal for the year, that's huge, and it cultivates success. And once they do that for somebody else, like for me, I'm trying to build my team for Dish One for this summer. So all my recruits, I text them all on Thanksgiving, like, "Hey, how you doing? Have a great day with your family." Just all that little stuff. It makes the biggest difference in the world. So I highly encourage everybody to keep doing that.
Hi, my name is Rachel Halleck. I'm the director of the Early Resource Connection Center at Ivy Tech. And in addition to a lot of the resources that Jeff mentioned on the academic side, the advising side, Starfish and things like that, we have a department that focuses on mental health needs. So we have a therapist's office. We have a Center for Working Families that does in-depth one-on-one employment and financial coaching. And a big initiative that we've taken on in this past year was developing a pool of emergency funds for our students across the state, so both in the central region and then across the state, so that, because what we found is that for a lot of students, $300 or $400 can make or break their academic experience, because when they have to make those tough decisions of, do I pay my rent or do I buy my books? Sometimes we have students that absolutely have to choose one of the two, and there's not an option to do both. And I think historically, within higher education, there's been kind of a belief and an approach that education happens at the college, and if you have a social service need, there's institutions out there that do those things, and you can go to those places and get your help and then come back to us for the academic needs. And what the research shows really is that we have between 30 and 50%, depending on if you're a 4-year or 2-year institution, of individuals that meet criteria for mental health diagnoses, often related to life stressors, financial stressors. And so, all that being said, I do have a question. And my question is, I was just wondering, across the state or just the national, if anybody had a feel for, I've been proud that Ivy Tech has been at the forefront to acknowledge that you have to integrate both the holistic wraparound services into an academic experience if you want to improve retention. And I guess my question is are we seeing any trends in other schools, and what are those trends looking like, and what's the efficacy of those sorts of interventions?
Okay, thank you. That's a great question. So I grew up in the K-12 space. Well, okay, I did grow up in the K-12 space, but also I've spent most of my career growing up in the K-12 space. And what I've found in that space is that these wraparound services that we're talking about they're beyond critical. If you have a student coming into school who hasn't eaten in 2 days, or the only time they eat is when they show up on the school doorstep, which is actually a decent part of our population that has to live that way, you're going to be trying to meet the basic needs of that student before they're able to start learning. And if you don't meet the basic needs, then you can just check off that student as a person who will not be engaged in class, and more than likely won't even be showing up later that year because they have to go start working to bring food home for their family. So when you take a look across the country, especially Miami-Dade has done a lot of work in wraparound services. They've won awards for this. When you start out with the younger population that you're trying to build for, it's an interesting perspective that you come across, because you realize that a person, when they actually have the choice and they are the ones that are responsible for bringing food home for their family, for taking care of their kids, for getting their kids to school, how can a mother come to class on a day if she has a child, a 6-year-old, at home sick? She can't leave that child sitting there by themselves, right? So yes, absolutely. There are national initiatives around this, and I'm so glad to hear that you guys are working in this way at Ivy Tech. There's also an initiative on mental health. I put in a plug for my own kid here. She's a 16-year-old, and she just transferred to Hamilton Southeastern this year. She is working with the mayor's office in Fishers to try to get a psychologist based at every one of the schools in the district, and increased mental health awareness education within the schools. If we can start younger, we're going to set people up to be able to make the decisions along the way, and to be able to prioritize for when these things do come up, and to know that if they had to miss a week of school, or they can't get into their online classes for a week, it's actually okay, because you can reach out to the administrators or to the instructors and help to troubleshoot with them. So it's really starting to empower people and teach them that, hey, all you have to do is reach out, and we have people here that are willing to help you. It's a great question. Jeff, do you want to?
Other questions?
I'm a high school counselor, and I work with students at a high school where we put in an advisory for college-bound preparation. It's part of their daily advisory activity, and we've put together a curriculum to try and help prepare them for some of these challenges that they're going to face in in college. We are always reevaluating that, because we're not certain that we should have a student advisory group, I think, but it's hard getting high school kids to sit down and talk to us about things they're not really sure yet what they're going to be facing. But I guess my question really for Taylor if you thought back about when you were in high school, I do think there's a point in your life when you're ready to hear information and where it's just people talking at you. You mentioned your orientation in college. They told you about a lot of things. What would there have been a benefit, or what would you advise, I guess, for as a high school student, senior in high school, last semester, what would have been the information you really wanted to know that would have made a difference when you left for college?
Well, I'm really glad to hear that you guys have a program like that in place, because that's huge for kids that don't know what they want to do and like they don't know what to expect. So creating, you know, a basis for what they're getting into is awesome. So thanks for doing that. One of the biggest things I would have wanted to know is just what's coming. You know, you've been there. I'm sure all the people you work with, you know, they've all been through all the experiences. So I think that just being a mentor to them would be one of the biggest things. Like, share your experiences. You know, tell them the struggles that you had, and like, if they have the same ones, like, talk to you about it. Just, you know, create a relationship with them and let them know that, like, they have something to fall back on, so that they have a resource, you know. I think that's one of the biggest things. And teaching them, like, skills that are going to help them after school, like how to study is something that no high school student wants to learn, but it's imperative, because, you know, the way you learn in high school is a little different than it is in college. So to have, you know, a transition phase that last semester would be huge. I think that's one of the things I would have benefited from the most.
Thank you.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Or no more questions? Okay. All right. Very good. Well, I want to thank my panelists. Thank you for coming out today.